Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
We are behind the scenes planning for next season. In the meantime, we hope you enjoy some of our favorite shows from this last year.
Today's program is all about wonderful plants that will be vying for a place in your garden next spring. Host Casey Hentges shows off a beautiful tree that explodes with sweet blooms. There are plants with colorful fruits, plants with great fall foliage, flowering plants for the shade, early spring blooms, and plants that will stand up to interloping deer.
When you're looking for a landscape tree, why not get the most bang for your buck and not only get a great shade tree, but one that blooms for you as well. This is the Japanese tree lilac, also known as Syringa reticulata. And you can see behind me that it gets to be about 25 feet tall with a 20-foot spread. This tree's been getting a lot of attention here at the Arboretum, and I wanted to share it with you. You can see it has lovely cream flowers that bloom in late spring, a little bit later than your typical lilac shrub. Like the lilac shrub, though, it does have similar leaves, and it will also need pruning after it is done blooming. So you want to wait for those flowers to come on and then prune it. This tree does best in rich, slightly acidic soil, but it can tolerate some other soils as well. It does well in urban conditions, mainly because of its smaller size. It prefers full sun, but it can handle a little bit of shade, but you'll find that the flowering may suffer a little bit as you get into more shade. In addition to these great fragrant flowers, you'll also find that it has a nice exfoliating bark on both the stem and the trunk of the tree. If you're looking for an alternative to maybe that later blooming crepe myrtle, this is a great one, the Japanese tree lilac. As we approach winter, we start looking at our landscape for winter interests. A lot of times we think about hollies with their berries, but we have 5 plants that have berry-like fruit that aren't hollies.
Plant number 1.
Whether you're an OU fan or an OSU fan and you're looking to add a little fan spirit into your landscape with orange or red, pyracantha will provide both of those colors. Here you can see we've gone with our favorite color, orange, with this Yukon Bell cultivar. There's also cultivars available that provide a yellow berry-like fruit as well. You can see it has dense branching structure, which makes it a really nice wildlife shelter in the winter time. The other thing that aids in that is the fact that it's semi-evergreen, so it's going to hold on to these leaves. As well as most cultivars tend to have a lot of thorns on them. So that kind of provides protection for that wildlife that might find refuge in this shrub throughout the winter time. There are cultivars that are thornless, such as Waterii. Now, pyracantha angustifolia can get some diseases, including fire blight and scab, but the best way to prevent those is just to select a cultivar that is resistant, such as Apache or Fiery Cascade. Depending on which cultivar you select, they can get anywhere from 2 feet tall to 12 feet tall. But there is bound to be one that works for you in your landscape.
Plant number 2.
Blue muffin viburnum is another great landscape plant that does well on the edge of a tree line or a forested area. It likes that part sun, part shade location. You can see here it gets to be about 5 to 6 feet tall at its mature height. And what we really like about it is it has these blueberry-like berry fruit that it produces late in the fall. Now, prior to this, in late spring, early summer, these were white flowers covering this plant, and while they aren't fragrant, they make a nice contrast against the dark green leaves. This plant is native to North America and enjoys the clay soils of Oklahoma, as well as it's tolerant of growing under the black walnut tree. This foliage will start to turn a little bit fall color as it loses those leaves come wintertime.
Plant number 3.
Calicarpus is another great landscape plant to add to your garden, and there's 4 that we typically are looking at, 4 different species, and this is Calicarpa americana that is native to the United States. What Calicarpas are known for are these weeping branches that have these bright pink or purple berries on them. There are some cultivars that also have white berries if you prefer white over the pink. This is Calicarpa americana, and you can see we've got ours tucked under some cedar trees because they do like to grow again along that tree line where they get part sun, part shade. Being native, they do well here in Oklahoma, and they enjoy our soils, but they are deciduous, so they're gonna lose their leaves, but these berries will persist a little bit longer. Calicarpas are deciduous, and this one has green leaves, but there are some cultivars that have variegated foliage as well.
Plant number 4.
One of my favorites is this native shrub. It's Euonymus americana, or also known as strawberry bush. Now, it is native to Oklahoma, and it will naturalize. It's a multi-stem shrub that has inconspicuous flowers. So you're not really growing it for the flowers, but what we're growing it for is this amazing fruit. It has kind of this strawberry-like fruit, hence the name strawberry bush, or the common name hearts of bursting. You can see that these hot pink bumpy capsules open up to reveal these red, orangish colored berry-like fruit. It just covers this plant in late fall, which is really nice, but it will drop off. This shrub likes clay soils and moist soils. It's tolerant of growing near black walnut trees, and is hardy from zone 6 to 9. And you might find that the deer also like this shrub.
Plant number 5.
If you don't have room in your landscape for a shrub, you might look at this porcelain vine to give you those berry-like fruit. You can see here it has beautiful berries that come in a range of color from teal to almost a plum color, and they're almost kind of iridescent. Now, these are on the vine that has a kind of a deeply lobed leaf. This vine is deciduous, so it's going to lose these leaves in the wintertime. And it doesn't have flowers that are that showy. We really grow it for the fruit. Now, there is also a variegated variety available, so it will give you a little more interest. This plant is best grown in full sun and will grow 15 to 25 feet tall, as it has tendrils that will allow it to climb up on structures. It's actually related to the grapevine, and so it has that same sort of growth habit. You might check out this porcelain vine if you don't have room for a shrub. Well, these are just 5 landscape plants that you can add to your garden that give you that berry-like fruit. But there are plenty others, such as this Carolina buckthorn that has red berries that turn to this dark black color. So if you're looking to add berry-like fruit to your landscape for that winter interest, there's more options than just hollies. When we talk about fall foliage, we often think of large trees, but if you have a small landscape, you might not be able to incorporate many trees. Here are 5 that you can incorporate to add more fall foliage.
Plant number 1.
Itea virginica, also known as sweet spire, is a shrub that gets about 3 to 4 feet tall. It grows in full sun, but you can push it into shade a little bit. It has cylindrical white flowers that come on in spring into early summertime. You can see it has lovely red foliage that it produces in late fall. There is a cultivar called Henry's Garnet that also produces even more red foliage on it in the fall time, and is said to have bigger, larger flowers on it in the summertime. It prefers moist, well-drained soils, but is adaptable to many soil conditions.
Plant number 2.
Amsonia herbectii is a great fall foliage plant as it gets this golden color with its nice fine foliage. You might remember we featured it on the show before as a great pollinator plant with its star-shaped light blue flowers that it gets in late spring, early summer. Now it does get quite large. You can see it's about 4 feet tall, and it will flop sometimes, so the best way to prevent it from flopping is to cut it back by about 6 inches right after it blooms. Amsonia herbectii is a native that prefers full sun.
Plant number 3.
Euonymus alata is appropriately named burning bush, as you can see the brilliant red fall foliage that it gets. It prefers to grow in full sun. You can push it into shade a little bit, but you're going to sacrifice some of this fall color. It is a shrub that gets to be about 15 feet tall, but is most often trimmed to stay more compact. It prefers well-drained soils, but does like consistent watering.
Plant number 4.
Hydrangea corsifolia, also known as the oakleaf hydrangea, is named that because of the shape of the leaf. But with fall color like this, you would think it would be more reminiscent of a maple tree. Now, we often think about oakleaf hydrangeas for their panicles that they get, the white panicles that they get in the summertime. They turn a light pink later on as the flowers mature, but we have beautiful fall foliage off of this plant as well. Now, oakleaf hydrangeas, you want to make sure not to prune them this time of the year in the fall, as they bloom on old wood. So they've already set their flower buds on their stems. If you were to cut those now and prune the plant back, you would be removing those flowers for next year. So the ideal time to prune an oakleaf hydrangea is right after it flowers. Oakleaf hydrangeas can range in a height from 4 to 8 feet depending on which cultivar.
Plant number 5.
Little blue stem is one of our favorite ornamental grasses, and one reason why our prairies have so much color to them. As the name implies, it has a blue hue to the stems during the summertime that then turns to this reddish purple color in the fall. Being a native, it is used to our dry summer months and also sometimes our less than stellar soil conditions. In fact, if you do plant it in too rich of a soil, it can flop on you. That's one of the problems with this plant, is planting it in too rich of a soil, as it has no major pest problems. This particular plant is a cultivar known as smoke signal, reaching about 40 inches tall and having even more brilliant color. While you might not have more space for trees, these 5 shrubs will ensure that you have plenty of fall color. To me, a well-designed woodland garden is like walking through a life-size fairy garden. The cool colors of green are a nice relaxing place to just enjoy the fireflies throughout the evening. Now, a woodland garden may not be appropriate for every location in our state, but if you have a shady garden that has rich, moist soil, you might want to consider adding these 5 woodland plants.
Plant number 1.
Solomon seal is a great addition to a woodland garden with the nice cool shades of green that it provides. It has arching branches that are about 18 to 24 inches tall, and they individually come up out of the ground. Now from these branches you'll see a pair of white bell-shaped flowers that hang, and you'll notice these flowers starting to bloom not only by the look but also by the lily-like fragrance that they emit. Eventually these flowers turn into black colored berries that will hang from these branches. This is a great one for the woodland garden. This particular cultivar is called variegatum, and it's one that you'll often find on the market with these stripes of white or kind of a yellow marking through the leaves. Solomon seal is hardy from zones 3 to 8.
Plant number 2.
It's always easy to like a plant when it's first flushing out, but this plant, Bear's Britches, is one that I love because it has this lush green foliage throughout the season. It not only looks like this in early spring, but it will continue to look like this in August when a lot of our other landscape plants are starting to look a little more tattered. In fact, the foliage is so great on this plant, it is kind of known to be a model for what adorns the Greek and Roman Corinthian columns. Now, if I haven't convinced you of this plant just based off of the foliage alone, later on in spring, it will actually produce a 3 to 5 foot tall flowering spike that is covered with white flowers. Each flower is hooded with kind of a rose-colored petal that covers that white flower. It almost looks like a giant snapdragon. Being hardy from zones 7 to 10, it does like a little bit warmer climate, so if you are in northern Oklahoma, you want to allow this foliage to die back to provide kind of a natural mulch and protection throughout the winter time. You're then going to trim that foliage back in the spring, allowing this new growth to come back on. Bear's Britches is a great plant for any woodland garden.
Plant number 3.
You can't have a woodland garden without including some ferns. And this is the sensitive fern, and we enjoy this because of the great texture that it provides. Unlike some of the other plants we've mentioned, they provide flowers, but for ferns, we're just really looking for the color and the texture of these fern fronds. And these have big lobes in their leaves that you can see here. We call it sensitive fern, but it actually can be pretty aggressive and can get much taller in really moist conditions, especially near creeks and streams. So why is this plant called sensitive fern? Although it is winter hardy, the first frost that it experiences will set it back, as well as any other drought conditions that it might experience in the summertime.
Plant number 4.
Toad lily is another great woodland plant to add. It has an orchid-like flower, but it's actually in the lily family. It has a purple and white flower with little speckles all over it, and some say speckled like a toad. Now this plant will get to be about 2 to 3 feet tall, and what's nice about this plant is while some of your other woodland plants will start to shut down in late summer, that's when this just starts blooming. It's hardy in zones 4 through 8.
Plant number 5.
When we're talking about woodland plants, one of the last ones probably to come to mind would be an orchid. But here we have a hardy ground orchid, which is perfectly suited for a moist, rich, shady location. You can see it has these lovely cattleya-like flowers on it that come in pink, purple, and white. It also has these pleated-like leaves that are strappy. This orchid is hardy from zones 5 to 9, so it will return for you each season. Adding these 5 plants will add texture to your garden, the right amount of pop of color, and just those nice shades of green, turning your woodland garden into a fairy tale. I love walking through a garden and finding all the shapes that nature has to offer. And we have a plant here that has a very unique shape of a flower. You can see how it got its common name, bleeding heart. Its Latin name is Lampocapnus spectabilis, or was previously known under the genus as Dicentra. But it has these beautiful, delicate, arching branches, and this is a nice shade plant. Like most shade plants, it does prefer a rich, moist soil, but it can be a little sensitive to that moisture, especially in the wintertime. It does not tolerate wet soils at all, and in the summertime, it does not tolerate dry conditions. Typically, this foliage, as it emerged early in the spring, and you can see it's blooming early in the spring as well, this foliage will die back midsummer. But if it suffers from droughts, then that foliage will die back even sooner. Now this particular cultivar is called Gold Heart, and you can see it has beautiful chartreuse foliage, which is a nice pop of color in these shady conditions. Again, it's a great plant and it's got a unique flower that's unlike any other. Deer, you either love love them or you hate them, but if you've ever been out to your landscape and find it chomped down and looking like the salad bar at the end of a lunch period, they're probably not your favorite wildlife to have in the garden. Well, there's a lot of different things you can use in the garden to exclude deer, but sometimes they're really expensive and they might not be that reliable. One thing we need to look at is plants in our garden and which plants deer prefer and which they don't prefer. Now, there is a disclaimer with this because depending on the deer population and the environmental conditions, sometimes deer will try plants even though they might be touted as deer resistant. Typically, deer don't prefer plants with strong smells such as lantana and herbs such as chives and mint. So you might want to think about incorporating those around those plants that deer do really prefer so that they kind of are a little bit deterred from those. Another thing you might think about doing is protecting some of those plants, especially if they're plants that have new growth. Sometimes deer just prefer nibbling on the plant's new growth, and so it's something that you'll just have to protect them for a short period of time while they're flushing out. Here are 5 plants, though, that you might want to consider that are deer resistant. This is one shrub you will notice when it is in flower, but the deer will not. This is Calycanthus floridus, Aphrodite, and you can see it has beautiful kind of maroon, almost like magnolia-like flowers. The common name on this is sweet shrub, which is very fitting because it has an apple-like fragrance to the flower. And the leaves and the bark and the seed pods, when they're crushed, they also have kind of a spicy scent to them. You can actually dry out those petals and use them in potpourri. Now, this shrub will get to be about 4 to 6 feet tall in its preferred loamy soil and full sun, but it will also tolerate clay soils and just get a little leggier in shadier conditions. While we tend to think deer like grass, ornamental grasses are one grass that deer don't really prefer eating on. Lemongrass is one that I think it's the smell that probably deters the deer, as it has a nice lemon fragrance to it. Now, it is an annual in most of Oklahoma, only being hardy to zone 8, so you'll need to replant it each year, but it will get to a good sized clump by the end of the season. And I guarantee it'll be one that you'll be pulling the leaves off of, not the deer. The other grass that you might want to consider is pink muley, and while it'll probably go undetected by both you and the deer most of the season, because it has just kind of a spiky look to it, not so much a soft flowing grass look. In the fall, I guarantee it'll be one that you notice and not the deer, as the pink plumes bloom above those grass blades. Also, Ravenna grass is a nice grass to add, and I think it's the size alone that's intimidating to the deer, as it can get 9 to 12 feet tall. This is a hardy grass that makes a great focal point with its giant plumes that come up out of the center of it. And finally, our native switchgrass, Panicum virgatum. It is a great grass, only getting to be about 3 to 5 feet tall. It makes a nice clump, and it's one that you can use in mass with several other plants around it. Now, it does come in different colors, including red, blue, and the green foliage. If it's color that you're looking to add into your garden, nothing will add that color like the scarlet monarda. It comes in various shades of reds and pinks and whites, but nothing says stop to those deer like the scarlet monarda. Yet it's a green light to other wildlife such as hummingbirds and butterflies and bees. Now, don't be concerned about the bees, because its common name is bee balm, and it's said to use the leaves to soothe any bee stings. It is in the mint family, so you'll notice it has a fragrance to those leaves, and like many mints, it will colonize, especially in moist conditions. This plant can suffer from powdery mildew, especially if there's poor air circulation, but there's cultivars that tend to be a little bit more resistant to powdery mildew. There are so many great spireas to consider also. There are some that bloom early in spring, such as bridal wreath, and some that bloom later in the summertime. Most come in colors of pinks and whites with their flowers. And you can also look at the foliage and get some interesting texture with it as well, such as this birch leaf spirea. There are some that have narrow leaves, such as ogon, and also the foliage can come in a range from blues to greens to chartreuse. One thing you want to consider when you're looking at which spirea to choose is the mature size. Some spirea will only stay a couple of feet tall, while others will get several feet tall and become a larger shrub for you. Whichever spirea you choose, you can guarantee that it's probably deer resistant.
Next week on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we're going to do a little building. We have a project to build a decorative concrete planter, and Casey will put together a succulent dish garden that can brighten things up this winter and then be used as a centerpiece at your backyard barbecues this summer. Join us then for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society. We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.